The Winchester rifle cracked against Colt Ravencrest's shoulder as he squeezed off another shot at the wolves circling the overturned cart. 3 children huddled beneath the wreckage while their mother, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead, desperately threw rocks at the snarling pack. "Get away from them." Colt's voice boomed across the Montana prairie as he spurred his stallion forward, the thunder of hooves mixing with his war cry. The woman looked up, her violet eyes wide with terror and hope. Dirt streaked her torn calico dress, and her auburn hair had escaped its pins. But something in her fierce determination to protect her young ones struck Colt like lightning. He'd never seen such raw courage. 2 more shots sent the wolves scattering into the twilight. Colt leaped from his horse, his boots hitting the dusty ground as he rushed to the family. The woman clutched a crying infant to her chest, while 2 older children, a boy and girl no more than 7 and 5, pressed against her sides. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" Colt knelt beside her, his calloused hands gentle as he examined the cut on her brow. We're fine," she whispered, though her voice shook. "Thank you, mister. I thought we were." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Cornelia Ashworth," she managed, extending a trembling hand. "These are my children, Jasper, Violet, and baby Knox." Colt's eyes took in their threadbare clothes, the meager possessions scattered from the broken cart, the hollow look of hunger. In the children's faces, his jaw clenched. No family should be wandering these dangerous territories alone, especially not a woman with 3 little ones. Colt Ravencrest. "I own the Double R Ranch about 5 miles south," stood, scanning the darkening horizon. "What brings you out here so late, Mrs. Ashworth?" Cornelia's cheeks flushed with shame. "We were traveling to my sister's place in Copper Creek, but our horse threw a shoe 20 miles back. We've been walking for 2 days, sleeping rough." Her voice broke. "Had to choose between fixing the cart or buying food for the children." Baby began to wail, and Cornelia rocked him frantically. Colt noticed how her hands shook with exhaustion, how she swayed on her feet. When was the last time this woman had eaten? "Get in my wagon now," he commanded, his tone brooking no argument as he gestured to his sturdy buckboard. "All of you." Cornelia shrank back. "I appreciate your help with the wolves, but I can't, Mrs. Ashworth." Colt's green eyes blazed with determination. "Night's falling fast and there's a storm brewing. Those wolves will be back with their pack, and there are worse things than wolves in these parts after dark." He stepped closer, his voice gentling. "I'm not asking. I'm telling you, you and your children are coming with me." Something in his tone, the absolute certainty and strength of it, made Cornelia's resistance crumble. She was so tired, so frightened, and this man, there was honor in his eyes, something solid and trustworthy. "Just for tonight," she whispered. Colt gathered their scattered belongings, while Cornelia lifted her children into the wagon. As he helped her up, their hands touched, and electricity shot through both of them. Their eyes met and held for a heartbeat too long. The storm was coming. But neither of them realized it would change everything. The Double R Ranch sprawled across the valley like a kingdom, with its grand 2-story house, sprawling barns, and endless pastures dotted with cattle. Cornelia had never seen such wealth, and shame burned in her chest as Colt's wagon rolled up the circular drive. "Sweet mercy," young Jasper breathed, pressing his face to the wagon's side. "Ma, look at all them horses." Colt noticed Cornelia's discomfort and pulled the horses to a stop near the back entrance, rather than the imposing front door. "Mrs. Ashworth, I want you to know you're not charity. You've saved your children's lives out there, and that takes more courage than most men I know possess." Before she could respond, the back door burst open, and a woman with silver-streaked hair emerged, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. "Colt Ravencrest, what have you brought home now?" she called, then stopped short when she saw the family. "Bernadette, meet Mrs. Ashworth and her children. They need shelter for the night." Colt's voice carried an edge that made his housekeeper study him with sharp eyes. "Of course they do." Bernadette's expression softened as she took in the exhausted family. "Come along, dears. Let's get you fed and cleaned up." As Colt helped Cornelia down from the wagon, she stumbled with fatigue. His strong arms caught her, pulling her against his chest for a moment that stretched like eternity. She smelled like wildflowers in desperation, and something primitive stirred in Colt's gut. "I've got you," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Cornelia's pulse hammered as she looked up into his rugged face. No man had ever made her feel so protected, so desired. Feeling terrified her. "Mama, I'm hungry," little Violet whimpered, breaking the spell. Bernadette clucked her tongue. "When did these babies last eat?" "Yesterday morning," Cornelia admitted, color flooding her cheeks. Colt's jaw went granite hard. "Bernadette, prepare. The guest rooms. All of them." When his housekeeper raised an eyebrow, he added, "They'll be staying longer than tonight." "Mr. Ravencrest, I cannot accept," Cornelia began. "You can and you will." Colt's tone was steel wrapped in velvet. "Your cart's destroyed, you have no horse, and winter's coming fast. Your sister's place is still 3 days' ride in good weather." That evening, after the children had been bathed, fed, and tucked into beds softer than clouds, Cornelia found herself alone with Colt in his study. She'd borrowed one of Bernadette's dresses, and the way Colt's eyes darkened when he looked at her made her breath catch. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Standing by the massive stone fireplace, Colt poured 2 glasses of whiskey, offering her one. "Maybe because when I saw you throwing rocks at those wolves, I realized I'd never met a woman like you." He moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "Maybe because those children deserve better than sleeping in the dirt. And maybe," Cornelia's voice was barely a whisper, "maybe because I've been alone in this big house for too long, and for the first time in years, it feels like home." Their eyes locked across the flickering firelight. The attraction between them was undeniable, dangerous, and growing stronger by the hour. Cornelia set down her untouched whiskey with trembling fingers. "I should check on the children." But as she moved to leave, Colt caught her hand. "Cornelia." The sound of her name on his lips sent shivers through her. She was a widow, alone and desperate, and he was offering her everything she'd ever dreamed of. But could she trust it? Could she trust him? 3 weeks had passed since that storm-swept night, and Cornelia felt herself falling into a rhythm at the double R that both comforted and terrified her. The children bloomed under Bernadette's care and Colt's gentle attention. But Cornelia couldn't shake the feeling that she was living in a dream that would soon shatter every morning. She watched from the kitchen window as Colt worked with his men, his powerful frame outlined against the autumn sky. Every evening he returned with that slow smile that made her heart race. The way he looked at her across the dinner table, the way he listened to her stories, the way he played with her children as if they were his own, it was everything she'd never dared hope for, but doubt gnawed at her. Why would a man like Colt Ravencrest want a penniless widow with 3 children? The answer came crashing down one afternoon when Belinda Fairfax arrived in her gleaming carriage, dressed in emerald silk and dripping with jewels. Cornelia was hanging laundry when the beautiful blonde swept up the front steps like she owned the place, "Colt, darling." Belinda's voice carried across the yard like a bell. "I've come to discuss our wedding plans." Cornelia's hand stilled on baby Knox's shirt. "Wedding plans?" Through the open window she heard Colt's voice, tight with annoyance. "Belinda, I told you." "Oh, don't be silly." "Daddy says the merger between our ranches is practically decided. We'll be the most powerful couple in the territory." Cornelia's world tilted sideways. Of course, she was just a temporary distraction, a charity case he'd taken pity on. How could she have been so foolish? That evening, Colt found her packing, their meager belongings in the guest room. "What are you doing?" His voice was sharp with alarm. What I should have done weeks ago. Cornelia didn't look at him, afraid he'd see the tears threatening. "We've imposed on your kindness long enough. Cornelia, look at me." When she didn't, he crossed the room and caught her hands. "What's this really about?" Miss Fairfax visited. Today, the words tasted like ashes. She mentioned wedding plans. Colt's curse would have made a sailor blush. "Belinda Fairfax is a spoiled child whose father wants my land. I wouldn't marry her if she were the last woman on earth, but everyone expects." "I don't give a damn what everyone expects." Colt's hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his blazing green eyes. "The only woman I want is standing right here." Before Cornelia could protest, his mouth claimed hers in a kiss that burned away every doubt, every fear. She melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt as 3 weeks of suppressed longing exploded between them. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you," Colt said simply. "I love your courage, your strength, the way you'd fight wolves with your bare hands to protect your children. I love how you make this house feel alive." His thumb traced her cheek. "Marry me, Cornelia." "Colt." Her voice broke. "I'm nobody. I have nothing to offer you. You're wrong." His kiss was gentler this time, full of reverence. "Oh, you're everything." But as they held each other in the lamplight, neither saw the shadow that had been watching from the trees. Belinda Fairfax's face was twisted with rage as she gathered her skirts and stalked back to her carriage. If Colt Ravencrest thought he could humiliate her for some penniless nobody, he was about to learn exactly what the Fairfax family was capable of. The real battle was just beginning. The attack came at dawn, swift and brutal. Cornelia woke to the sound of gunfire and Colt's voice shouting orders to his men. She rushed to the window and saw armed riders surrounding the ranch house, their faces masked with bandanas. "Ma!" Jasper's frightened cry sent her rushing to gather her children. Baby Knox wailed as she clutched him to her chest, hurting Violet, and Jasper toward the back of the house. Colt burst through the bedroom door, his rifle in hand and blood streaming from a graze on his temple. "Get to the root cellar now." "What's happening?" Cornelia's voice shook as another volley of gunfire erupted outside. "Fairfax hired guns." Colt's eyes were deadly cold. "He wants me ruined or dead, doesn't much care which." They raced through the kitchen where Bernadette waited with tears streaming down her face. "They shot Miguel," she sobbed, "and burned the east barn." Colt's jaw clenched. Miguel had been with him for 15 years, had a wife and 4 children. "Get everyone to the cellar. I'll hold them off." "No." Cornelia grabbed his arm. "There are too many of them. They'll kill everyone in this house to get to me." Colt's voice was granite. "Including your children." Before Cornelia could argue, an explosion shook the house. Through the shattered kitchen window, she saw flames consuming the stable where Colt's prize horses screamed in terror. Colt snarled, raising his rifle. "Wait." Cornelia's mind raced. "There's another way." She told him about the hidden passage her late husband had shown her in their old cabin. Most old ranch houses had them, built during the Indian Wars. "If the Double R had won, ... the pantry," Bernadette gasped. "There's a loose board behind the flour barrels."
10 minutes later, they were crawling through a tunnel that led to the old mine shaft 1/2 mile from the house.
Colt carried Baby Knox, while Cornelia helped the other children through the darkness. Behind them, the sound of gunfire grew more distant. They emerged in a grove of cottonwoods just as the main house erupted in flames. Cornelia's heart broke as she watched everything Colt had built being destroyed because of his association with her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "This is all my fault." Colt pulled her against him with his free arm. "No, this is Fairfax showing his true colors." His voice was deadly quiet. "Now I'm going to show him mine." But their escape had been noticed. A shout echoed through the trees, and 3 riders burst from the smoke, their guns glinting in the morning sun. "There they are." Colt shoved Knox into Cornelia's arms and raised his rifle. But he was 1 man against 3. The odds were impossible. That's when the war cry split the air. A dozen riders thundered through the trees. Neighboring ranchers who had seen the smoke and come to help. Jake Morrison led them, his face grim with purpose. "Nobody burns out Colt Ravencrest on our watch," he roared. The battle was swift and decisive. Fairfax's hired guns, faced with determined men defending their neighbor, broke and ran. 2 were captured. The rest disappeared into the Badlands as the smoke cleared. Colt stood among the ashes of his home, Cornelia and her children beside him. Everything he'd worked for was gone, but the woman he loved and her children were safe. "We'll rebuild," Jake Morrison said, clapping Colt on the shoulder. "Every man in the valley will help." Colt looked at Cornelia, her face streaked with soot, but her eyes blazing with determination. "Together?" She took his hand, their fingers interlacing like their fates. Together. But in the distance, Belinda Fairfax watched through spyglasses, her face twisted with fury. If she couldn't have Colt Ravencrest, she'd make sure no one could. The war was far from over. Winter descended on the valley like a relentless enemy. But the community of ranchers worked together with a determination that warmed hearts despite the bitter cold. In 3 months, they had rebuilt not just Colt's house, but something stronger, a home filled with love and laughter. Cornelia stood in the kitchen of the new house, her hands covered in flour, as she prepared Christmas dinner. Through the window, she watched Colt teaching Jasper to rope fence posts, while little Violet sat on his shoulders, giggling with delight. Baby Knox, now walking and babbling constantly, toddled between them on sturdy legs. The sight filled her with such happiness it hurt. "That man loves those children like his own," Bernadette observed, following her gaze. "I know." Cornelia's voice was soft with wonder. "Sometimes I think I'm dreaming." "Dreams don't build houses or fight off hired guns," the older woman said practically. "That man moved heaven and earth for you and your babies." But Cornelia's happiness was shadowed by worry. For weeks, strange things had been happening. Cattle found dead with no apparent cause. Wells poisoned. Supply wagons mysteriously delayed. Other ranchers whispered about the Fairfax family's growing influence in territorial politics, about judges bought and sheriffs intimidated. The door burst open, bringing a swirl of snow and Colt's laughter as Violet squealed about building snowmen. But Cornelia noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes swept the room before he relaxed. "Papa Colt! Papa Colt!" Violet launched herself at him, and Cornelia's heart clenched at the title that had come so naturally to her daughter. That night, after the children were asleep, Colt found Cornelia on the porch despite the cold, staring out at the star-filled sky. Worried about something? He wrapped a thick blanket around them both, pulling her against his warmth. "About everything," she turned in his arms. "Colt, maybe we should leave the territory. Start over somewhere the Fairfax name doesn't carry weight. Run away?" His voice was incredulous. "Not run away. Start fresh. Build something that's truly ours." Her hands fisted in his shirt. "I can't bear the thought of them hurting you because of me." Colt tilted her chin up, his eyes fierce with love and determination. "Cornelia Ashworth, I've told you before. Don't give a damn about the Fairfax family. This is our land, our home, our life, and I'll be damned if I let anyone drive us away from it." His kiss was passionate, claiming full of the fire that had drawn her to him from the beginning. They broke apart. Both were breathing hard. "Besides," he murmured against her lips, "I have something that might even the odds." He led her inside to his study, where he pulled out a leather portfolio from his safe. Inside were legal documents bearing official territorial seals. "I've been working with the territorial governor," Colt explained. "Fairfax's hired guns left. Evidence when they burned us out. Witnesses, shell casings. One of them even had a letter from Belinda promising payment." His smile was sharp as a blade. "The governor is very interested in cleaning up corruption in his territory." Cornelia's eyes widened as she read the papers. Warrants, indictments, seizure orders for Fairfax property obtained through illegal means. "How long have you known?" she breathed. "Since the week after the attack. I wanted everything airtight before. I told you." Colt's arms came around her from behind. "Tomorrow, federal marshals arrive to arrest Benjamin Fairfax and his daughter. Their reign of terror ends here." Relief flooded through Cornelia so powerfully her knees nearly gave out. "Really over?" "Almost." Colt turned her in his arms, his eyes blazing with love and something that looked like mischief. "There's just one more thing I need to take care of." Before she could ask what he meant, he dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring that caught the firelight like captured stars. It wasn't the biggest diamond she'd ever seen, but it was perfect, clearly chosen with love and care. "Cornelia Ashworth, you saved my life the night I found you fighting those wolves. You saved my soul every day since. Will you marry me? No. You let me be a father to your children? Will you help me fill this house with love and laughter for the rest of our lives? Through tears of joy, she could only whisper, yes. Outside, snow continued to fall, but inside the Double R Ranch, love blazed brighter than any flame. The wedding was held on a crisp February morning in the newly built church, with half the territory in attendance. Cornelia walked down the aisle in a dress of ivory silk that had belonged to Colt's mother, her children preceding her with solemn importance. Jasper carried the rings, Violet scattered rose petals, and baby Knox toddled alongside them, occasionally. Stopping to wave at the congregation, Colt stood at the altar in his best suit, his eyes never leaving his bride's face. When the preacher asked if anyone objected to the union, the silence was profound. The Fairfax family was conspicuously absent. Having been arrested the week before and shipped to the territorial capital for trial, "I do," Cornelia whispered. When asked if she would take Colt as her husband, and the words rang with such joy that several women in the congregation dabbed their eyes. The kiss that sealed their union was tender, but passionate, a promise of all the love-filled years, too. Come at the reception in the ranch's great room, Jake Morrison raised his glass high. To Colt and Cornelia Ravencrest, may their love be as enduring as these mountains and as wild as the prairie wind. To the Ravencrests, the crowd echoed. But the real celebration happened later, when the guests had gone home and the children were tucked into their beds in the house that was truly theirs now. Colt carried his bride across the threshold of their bedroom, both of them laughing like teenagers. "Mrs. Ravencrest," he murmured against her ear, setting her gently on her feet. "Like the sound of that," she whispered, her hands working at the buttons of his shirt. Their lovemaking was everything Cornelia had dreamed, passionate yet tender, wild yet reverent. As they lay entwined afterward, she traced patterns on Colt's chest and marveled at how perfectly she fit against him. "Regrets?" he asked softly. "Only one." When he tensed, she smiled up at him. "I wish I could have met you sooner." Spring arrived early that year, bringing news that Benjamin Fairfax had been sentenced to 10 years in territorial prison for hiring mercenaries and conspiracy to commit murder. Belinda had been given a lighter sentence, but was banned from the territory for life. The Double R Ranch flourished under Colt and Cornelia's partnership. She proved to have a brilliant head for business, streamlining operations and negotiating better prices for their cattle. He expanded their holdings, buying land from smaller ranchers who wanted to sell rather than struggle through bad years by summer. Cornelia was showing signs of carrying their first child together. Colt was so protective and excited that Bernadette threatened to lock him in the barn if he didn't stop hovering. For children, he mused one evening as they sat on the porch watching their family play in the yard, "We're going to need to add more rooms to the house." 5, Cornelia corrected with a mysterious smile. Colt's eyes widened. "Twins? The doctor thinks so." She laughed at his stunned expression. "Still happy you picked up that desperate woman." "And her children?" Instead of answering with words, Colt swept her into his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing as Jasper, Violet, and Knox ran to join the celebration. That night, as they lay in bed with Cornelia's head on his shoulder, Colt thought about the night he'd found her fighting wolves with nothing but rocks and determination. He'd thought he was saving her, but she'd been the one to save him from loneliness. From a life without real love, from a future that stretched empty and meaningless. "I love you, Mrs. Ravencrest," he whispered into her hair. "And I love you too," she murmured sleepily. "My wild cowboy who rides to the rescue." Outside their window, the Montana wind sang through the cottonwoods, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled at the moon. But inside the Double R Ranch, love kept them safe and warm. It's now and always, 5 years later. The Double R Ranch stretched across the valley like a small kingdom, its prosperity evident in the gleaming barns, thriving herds, and the large 2-story house that had grown to accommodate the Ravencrest family. The morning sun painted the mountains purple and gold as Cornelia stood on the wraparound porch, watching organized chaos unfold in the yard below. Jasper, now 12 and tall for his age, was teaching his twin siblings, 4-year-old Cassidy and Caleb, how to properly curry a gentle mare. Violet, 10 and fierce as her mother, was showing baby Knox, now 6, the proper way to gather eggs without frightening the hens. And 3-year-old Aurora, the surprise addition to their family, sat in the dirt making mud pies with intense concentration. Da! 6 children, Bernadette muttered, as she joined Cornelia on the porch, shaking her head but smiling. This house sounds like a cavalry charge most days. 7, Cornelia corrected with a grin, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly. Sweet mercy. Bernadette's eyes widened. Does Colt know? I'm telling him tonight. It's our anniversary. The sound of thundering hooves announced Colt's return from the south pasture, and Cornelia's heart still skipped a beat at the sight of him. At 35, he was in his prime, and powerful, his face weathered by sun and wind, but his green eyes as intense as ever. Gray touched his temples now, making him even more distinguished. Aurora shrieked, abandoning her mud pies to run toward him. Colt swung down from his horse and scooped up his youngest daughter, spinning her around as she giggled. The other children converged on him like a small army, all talking at once about their morning adventures. But his eyes sought Cornelia's across the chaos, and the look that passed between them was as electric as it had been that first night. Time had only deepened their love, seasoned it with shared joys and weathered storms. That evening, after the children were finally settled, Colt led Cornelia to the garden he'd built for her behind the house. Roses climbed the arbor, and a small fountain bubbled peacefully in the center. Chinese lanterns cast warm light over the intimate space. 5 years, he mused, pulling her into his arms for a slow dance to music only they could hear. Best 5 years of my life, she whispered against his chest. Even with all the chaos, the sleepless nights, the time Aurora tried to paint the chickens, Cornelia laughed. Especially then. Do you ever think about that night, when you found us? Every day? Colt's voice grew serious. I think about how close I came to losing you before I ever really had you, about how different everything would be if I'd been 10 minutes later or taken a different route home, but you didn't. Cornelia pulled back to meet his eyes. You were exactly where you needed to be, exactly when you needed to be there. Just like now. What do you mean? Instead of answering, she took his hand and placed it on her stomach. Happy anniversary, my love. Colt's eyes widened as understanding dawned, then blazed with joy. Another one? Another one. She laughed as he lifted her off her feet and spun her around. Are you happy? Happy? Colt set her down and cupped her face in his hands. Cornelia, you've given me everything I never knew I wanted. Family, a home, a purpose, bigger than just surviving. His voice grew husky. You've given me a life worth living. Their kiss was interrupted by a crash from the house, followed by Aurora's voice. It wasn't me. Should we? Cornelia began. Bernadette's got it, Colt said firmly, pulling her closer. Right now, I just want to hold my wife and think about our growing family. As they swayed together in the lantern light, Cornelia marveled at the twists. A fate that had brought them together. She'd been running from despair and poverty. He'd been isolated in his successful but empty life. Together, it built something beautiful and lasting. The wolf that had once threatened her children now seemed like a guardian angel in disguise. I love you, Colt Ravencrest, she whispered. I love you too, Cornelia, always and forever. Above them, stars wheeled across the endless Montana sky. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, not in threat this time, but in celebration of the wild, wonderful love that had transformed to lonely souls into a family that would last. For generations, the Double R Ranch had become more than a home. It was a legacy of love that would endure as long as the mountains stood and the prairie winds sang through the grass, and in the morning, it would be more beautiful chaos, more laughter, more love than any two people had a right to expect. But Colt and Cornelia Ravencrest had learned that sometimes. When you're brave enough to fight the wolves life sends your way, you find more happiness than you ever dared dream possible. Their love story had begun with a desperate plea. Get in my wagon now. It would continue forever with the simple truth. I choose you every day for the rest of our lives.